Bem, dando então continuidade à programação.
With the program, we invite as a chair of the How to Achieve Maturity and Self-Sufficiency, Brazilian Economic Industrial Complex, How to Achieve Maturity and Self-Sufficiency, Artur Couto, representative of Bio-Manguinhos and Fiocruz, and also technology development and raw materials in the Ministry of Health, Gadelha, who is currently in a committee of crisis due to the catastrophe in Rio Grande do Sul state.
Eu acabei de receber essa mudança.
So I was just aware of this change. So Dr. Akira, please, I pass the floor to you. We are honored to pass the floor to you. I have just received this message. Please do not scold me.
E como debatedores, vê se eu estou certa agora, tá?
And as fellow speakers in this panel, we invite Dr. Technical Director of Butantan Institute, Esper Kallás. He's a physician. He has a residence in infectology in the Servidor Público de São Paulo, and also in the Costa University in the United States, researching the production of specific antigens of cytokines by lymphocytes T after infection and vaccination. He has a master's in the Federal University of São Paulo, and his dissertation analyzed the risk of infection by HIV in the detention house of São Paulo, and he also studies infectious diseases and molecular diseases in the Federal University of São Paulo, where he's a tenured professor. And I invite the professor from the Luiz Marinho, from the official laboratories of Brazil. He's a master in politics of medications by the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul, and also pharmacologist and the Federal University of Minas Gerais. He was a director in Ezequiel Dias Institute, the president of the board of the Brazilian Association of Fine Chemistry, Biotechnology, and his specialties, Odilon Costa. He has a degree in business administration. He was executive productions in the Union of Pharmaceutical Products and Sindus Pharma and Sinfar of Rio de Janeiro. And he received award of Olavo Fontoura of Industrial Merit of Sindus Pharma. He's director of institutional relations of Laboratory Cristália. So I pass the floor to Dr. Akira.
Vocês estão me confundindo.
Okay, you're confusing me. So Dr. Artur was the one who I invited previously. Okay. He's going to be one of the panelists. So Artur Couto, please. Invite you to the stage. So he's Vice Director of Management and Institutional Development of the Bio-Manguinhos of Fiocruz. Have I mentioned your CV, your resume? Can I say, Dr. Akiris. So I apologize. See if I'm going to make any mistakes. So he's master in economy. He has a executive MBA in the COPEAD, Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and public administration in FGV. He has extensive curriculum in public health, and he was a director in Bio-Manguinhos Fiocruz, where he initiated 2 manufacturing units, and he's a member of Hemobras, member of the Administration Council for Molecular Biology in the Paraná State, and also director in the Atolfo de Paiva Foundation. Okay, now we are done.
Boa tarde, gente.
So good afternoon, you all. Good afternoon. I'm not sure if I say that I'm happy to be here because Dr. Carlos Gadelha, he was supposed to be here. However, this disaster in the Rio Grande do Sul state, the entities are all mobilized to support them. So I'm here, filling in the gap of Carlos Gadelha's gap. I'm not going to talk about the same subject, but I'm going to talk about this industrial complex, economic and industrial complex and healthcare, and that is a consequence of the needs of the country to have scientific, technological, and manufacturing of inputs that are essential for healthcare. We had always leaps in the science, especially in technology, in each disaster that we had in the country. So the epidemics that we had in the state of Rio de Janeiro, of yellow fever, varioles, and bubonic pest made the government create the Federal Soterápico Institute. And this was created due to the pandemics. And Oswaldo Cruz himself made a tripod institution where you have the research, development, and the learning. Actually, it had 4 pods and also the manufacturing. And more recently, with the multinational that left, and with biological products for the Ministry of Health, the DTP, when they asked them to improve the quality, this laboratory just canceled its activity and left the country without any supply, without anti-ophidic serum. And so in the campaign, this was demonstrated in the beginning of the century that the viper venom is very specific in the production. And so we could not import this serum. So we created a self-sufficient production of this anti-serum. So the government supported the laboratories that produce these serums and then the vaccines. And for 10 years, there was a support of $100 million during 10 years that make possible the modernization of Butantan's Institute, Bio-Manguinhos, and these laboratories were able to leave the obsolescence aspect that they had. So others, and I want to say that there were dozens of laboratories producing rabbi vaccines, but without the due quality. That was when the Ministry of Health in the 80s squeezed the quality assurance and then created the ENCQS, and Brazil adopted then in its program a double system for quality assurance in vaccines. So in addition to the quality control and the manufacturing, they also carried out in this double system of quality assurance in each batch to verify the quality of the vaccines that the immunization program in Brazil used. So in each epidemic, and the meningitis epidemic in the 70s, in the beginning of the 70s, brought the reorganization of the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. So the Ministry of Health, the federal government considered in its government program the recovery of Oswaldo Cruz Foundation as a method in modernizing much needed modernization when we had the vaccination against meningitis. We also had the technology for the manufacturing of this vaccine locally. So since then, we produced this vaccine, and at each epidemic, we have improvements that the government sees. So the pandemic brought another, I wouldn't say improvement, but an evidence. It showed a very clear evidence of the dependence, national dependence on everything. And when I'm say everything, I'll say that for us to produce a vaccine in the country, we import 90% of the inputs of the materials used in the production. So it's a very high dependence in the import of materials. So we depend on the equipment and imports for the laboratories because we do not have the manufacturing of equipment that can be certified and approved in the best practice of manufacturing. So this dependence, this huge dependence was very explicit, not only for the inputs, but also for equipment and also for other healthcare products. So I think that this economic complex is right in attacking these issues that we have in the country. However, it is necessary to have a program supported by the government together with the laboratories in the country, public and private laboratories, to mitigate this immense dependence on technology of inputs and equipment and among others. So I would like to say something in this aspect so that we can bring some light to this discussion, as the program says how to get the maturity, how to achieve the maturity. Because I think that we're a little bit distant from maturity, but how to achieve it, and also to achieve self-sufficiency. So I'll try to answer these questions, and I would start with our director from the Butantan Institute. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Akira. Just to say that we have here essential personality in Brazil for the development of our industrial complex. It's an honor to be here by your side, and what you have done in Rio de Janeiro and our colleagues in the Butantan Institute in the development of vaccination is very admiring, and you are an example for the challenges that we have further in the future. So I would start saying, just to make a remark, a very quick remark, and then we can open for discussion. But I would like to make a diagnosis of the situation, because recently a group of ours in Butantan went through a trip and visiting colleagues that creates immunobiologicals in China, India, and we had opportunities in the US, Europe, since we have taken over the institute in the beginning of last year. The Brazilian model is very different, because we historically went through a pathway that is a mixed pathway. If we see what happened in the US and the Europe, the immunobiological industry is much more driven towards the private sector, and there's a component of the participation of open capital companies that are part of this environment. When you go to China, it's the opposite. A great part is on public companies.
With a force and a vigor that's extraordinary in the scum line of production. India, too, is a country that has a huge amount of companies. If you look at the number of doses, they're responsible for a large proportion of the doses of immunobiologicals around the world. And there are companies, private companies, most of them are closed companies, listed companies, groups, and even families that take care of these companies. They're not listed companies, they're family-owned companies. They got to a very large volume of cheap doses. Brazil has a mixed system. It's very curious what we have adopted here in the country. The first thing that draws my attention to is that most vaccines produced in Brazil are produced by two public institutes, and they receive support from private institutions that were constituted throughout the years. And that ended up creating a model that is very different from the other ones. And we navigate through this environment in a way that's quite peculiar. And one of the things that drew my attention is that the pharmaceutical industry in Brazil has grown exponentially. What we have done, what private companies did in the development of generic medications, for example, it's extraordinary, the breakthroughs we reached. But curiously, there are no private companies in the country dedicated to the development and production and development of vaccines today. And I think that most of it is because the environment that was created, especially by the two public institutions in Brazil through the production of vaccines, using the purchasing power of the Brazilian state, allowed us to absorb part of these technologies within us. Is that the best model that we've been engaged in the past? Well, there are mixed opinions. People congratulate us on the model, and I'm one of them, but it's one of the strengths that we have to force to engage in our capacity to grow, to use this environment that was created in all these years to incorporate as many technologies as possible in Brazil, create a critical mass of people at work on innovation and discovery of new products, development and implementation of production platforms, which is what we'll bring to Brazil, and install capacity, as the name itself indicates, to incorporate self-sufficiency. We will be totally independent in the production of immunobiologicals. That's virtually impossible because we look at the world. There's no country that's perfectly independent, totally independent. Many of them, as rich as they are, depend, be it on the critical mass or inputs or equipment or productive capacity. We live obviously in this on this model that that's quite permeable in the world. There was the COVID-19 shock that called into question this whole supply chain that forced us to develop even local options, but there is a high interdependence around the world in terms of production. We must appreciate it, we must envision it, and smartly, because you have to see the ways in which we can minimize the impact that these barriers can impose upon us. The Butantan Institute has been working strongly in the absorption of these new technologies. We try to incorporate new factories. We migrate to systems, to factory systems that are flexible to absorb different products, because we know that the needs are volatile. They depend not only on the capacities that we'll be acquiring for vaccine coverage, going from a initial campaign to coverage campaigns for vaccinations, and to navigate the world of epidemics and pandemics. That's why we have migrated to this kind of platform, which allows us to adapt, absorb new technologies, but also engenders flexibility within our own space of activity. And also, to open up for debate among our colleagues, we are facing a wide range of investments in national development, internal national development of new technologies. That's something we take a great deal of pride in. We keep investing in it. And it's a question of honor for our institute to be able to bring products to the portfolio, or to the menu, if you will, of options, the menu of choices on our system, of health system, be it collective public health system or the complementary private health system. But primarily the basic mission is to work on discoveries within the country, inside the country. We could be talking about these things the whole day. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thanks for the invitation. And we congratulate our brethren of Fiocruz, which developed that effort to put this symposium together here in Rio de Janeiro, and to celebrate here and to say that we are very proud. And this beginning of this year, we have signed our strategic alliance, Butantan Fiocruz, to reinforce our capacity to produce immunobiological products. Thank you. Certainly, we will have questions, but let's leave them out till the end. And after all the presentations have been made, we'll open up for Q&A. Dr. Evelyn, you have the floor. Please, sir, you have the floor. What would I have? What will I say? I have my cheat notes. I might get confused. I might get tied up. They gave me this lectern, this podium. I have my cheat notes. Good afternoon, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I'd like to thank the as the president of Abifina, I got the invitation. Thank you very much for inviting me. I heard some food for thought in the hallways of this event. I have known you for a long time, don't get me wrong, but I got some provocations around, talk about this, talk about that. Where's Odilon? I'm not going to leave this place if you don't touch upon this topic or that topic. Over lunch, someone said, look, you have to go this way or that way. You really have to tackle these important issues. I'm going to try to bring to your attention, a reflection about the topic of the industrial complex and the health field, in the health arena. I will start off by saying two things. I am a market person. My training is on market affairs, but I'd like to start off by talking about the Unified Health Public Health System, SUS. Market people, financial people don't have a close view, a very neat view of this public health system. We work in retail and hospitals, and we're market people, but this country has, and it's some stock of assets, something fantastic, which is SUS, public health system, that provides access to any programs. Vaccination is one of them. AIDS is also another important area. Those with less income are eligible for the public health system. And when we talk about the public health system, we talk about access. These are two things that are absolutely intertwined. They're come together, actually. And this industrial complex and the industrial complex that's out there reminds me of Milor Fernandez in a book, the Inside Out of Life. It's all said and done. Everything has been said, and almost nothing has been done. It's the inside out part of life. This speech has come from a long time ago. This narrative has come from a long time ago. And I'm going to go back to the federal constitution signed in 1988. And it's chapter 4, science, technology, and innovation. And article 2018, 2019, for those who haven't read it yet, it's written right there, something that goes like something like this. Number one, the internal market, everything that you buy and sell that makes up our GDP is the stock. It's a national stock. It's part of the national stock. It's written in the Constitution, and it's the national treasure. And part of that of national treasure, it is part and parcel of the growth effort towards growing, increasing the industrial park, if you will, whatever category it falls into within the country, inside the country, with local production, generating local jobs, local employment. And there's something called purchasing power by the state, procurement power by the state. And this procurement power by the state is what, in a way, some way or the other, it nourishes the question of the industrial complex geared to health. There is an interesting collection of stakeholders in that market, that it is something potent and large. We cannot talk about the unified public health system without talking about something big, because the SUS is something huge. No country in the world with over 100 million people has that model of the unified public health system as Brazil does. No other country as large as Brazil, as populated as Brazil, has a unified public health system like we do. We must look inside, and we must turn our look towards the public health system with no political connotations involved with this. And the spiel I'm giving you, I'm going to read to you a quote from the speech by President Lula in Pernambuco recently in April, where he launched Hemobras. I think you have an idea that happened. They launch Hemobras, and President says something like this: if we Brazilians who want a sovereign country, who want a country capable of having a health industry, because we have a consuming agency, which is a consumer agency, which is the public health system, we must believe that we may have a health industrial complex to compete with any other country in the world, as rich as it may be. And that is the core, that is at the DNA of this health industrial complex. Recently, we put together a Industrial Development National Council under the leadership of the Vice President Geraldo Alckmin. Inside, they created a so-called NEB, New Brazilian Industries, NIB, and what we're postulating at this time, and as provocation to Professor Akira, has to do mostly with the production of inputs, pharmaceutical inputs. Actually, at COVID, Brazil find out what IFA was. Nobody knew what it was before COVID. And then Brazil began to talk IFA. Nobody knew exactly what it meant, but everybody knew that something called IFA did exist. And we have a small production of IFAs in Brazil. It's about 10% of our requirements, of our demand, but we import 90% of our pharmaceutical inputs, 90% almost the finished products as well. It's a food for thought, actually. It's a reflection provoked by Geneva. Professor Akira said, and I was quite concerned, I was sitting right there, and when you said that we need to reach the maturity of in this process. You said it yourself. I'm 80 years old. I said, look, where am I going? If I haven't reached maturity, where am I going? I'm 80 years old. And I just turned 80 and I still have to reach maturity. Jesus, that's something to think of. You know, I'm going to get there, Professor Kira, together with you. We're going to get there together. We're going to walk hand in hand towards maturity, Professor Kira. Now, the provocation by Odilon is that we need to have something more palpable, tangible, something we can get our hands on. He was provoking me, saying, look, you must talk about it's not enough to have a government policy. We need to have a state policy. Enough of government policies. We got to have a state policy. For me, it's great. I don't know about you, but I'm going to say it anyway. In industry and in the government itself, and public industries, the entrepreneurs and leaders are the same. For a long time, they've been the same. And the national industry, for example, the owners are 40, 50 years old, actually 40, 50 years of experience and working at the companies they've been working at. It's funny that our politicians are the same throughout time. Also, they have remained the same for centuries, actually, for decades. But the government leaders have changed. The politicians are the same, but those who govern are not. The executive branch changes every so often. And since they change every so often, every time they change, everything else changes. And we just went through recently something. For example, we just had a problem of funding that changed from one government to another. And then it's not a state policy, it's a government policy, and we have to start all over again. And like Laura Fernandes said, everything was said and nothing was done. What about new industrial policy in Brazil? It's not new, it's old. It's the old industry. The title, the acronym is new, but there's nothing really new to it. So we absolutely need to have, that Professor Kira's provocation is that me as the president of Abifina will have to do whatever I can to cater. The pressure was out there. He put it to me. He threw the ball at me. He said, look, Odilon, you got to do something. Something must happen. He was talking about EFAs, the local production of EFAs, medical inputs. We import 90% and we produce something 10%. So I want to conclude my remarks, but also there is your provocation that I'm going to have to cater to respond to policies. It's a slight touch. Funny, Magalhães Pinto, former governor of Minas Gerais, said, look, politics is like a cloud. It's like a cloud. You look at it now, it looks like something. You look at it again, a couple of minutes later, it changed completely. That's how fast it changes. You watch the last news at midnight, right before midnight. At 6 a.m., you get up and watch the first news report in the early morning and everything changed. That's how things operate. Things change overnight in Brazil. From the midnight news report till the 6 a.m. news report, everything changes. So we have to, we have to have a predictable, sustainable policy, because nobody invests, nobody puts money in anything unless it's something that will meant to be sold, or it will be meant to ensure a purchase on the strength of the procurement power of the state. Nobody throws money away to build something that will be there rotting away with no use whatsoever. As for the industrial health complex, recently we've had a public inquiry, 53, 54. Some of you might know what I'm talking about, a public inquiry concerning a new industrial policy that I imagined Professor Gadelha, if he were here now, he could say something about that new policy. But you come up with a public inquiry, you take part in it, you make suggestions, opinions, you give everything, but it will only be valid when it's published in the official Gazette. When you're going to have a new policy, we're waiting for the publication of this new policy on the official gazette. As for this thing called public-private partnerships, PPP, the reflection I'd like to put to you, the food for thought I'd like to give you, that's a belief. It's only a belief. There are some converted. Some people have been converted, quite a few actually, I would say. There are many critics that are ferocious, but I do have the hope that this learning curve is taking place as we speak frequently enough, and it's growing, it's increasing, it's on the ascending, on an ascending line, and soon enough we'll have a greater adherence or adhesion to this idea of a PPP, public-private partnership. Professor Kira provoked me into saying, look, I am a bit bashful when it comes to, I'm here as a vice president of the Cristales as well, of Cristales. You provoked me into talking briefly about two things. Can I say it? With your permission. Now, under his permission, I will tell you two things. Cristale is a national laboratory, 52 years old, in Itabira, countryside of São Paulo state, and it is a complex, industrial complex for health, geared to health. Our park, we have a pharmaceutical company, and yet another pharmaceutical company, a pharmacochemical, an oncological pharmacochemical plant, a biotechnological plant. One of the idealizers and founders is sitting right there.
And this complex that we have there along the time specialize in anesthesiology and anesthesia. And what happened is that we have all the kits for intubation, oral tracheal intubation, and with the COVID pandemics, we had to have the respirators and this incubation, and could only be done with the anesthesia and the muscle relaxants. And one laboratory manufactures this in the country in a vertical model from the first raw material, this line of anesthesics. And the Emergency Medical Association adopted this proceedings regarding anesthesiology in order to carry out oral tracheal proceedings, and we made 4 million units per month, and we start doing with COVID, with the heated demand, 20 million units, and this capacity was expanded for that. So I would say without a fear of making mistakes, I'm talking about even the finished product coming from Itapira. During COVID, Brazil saved Brazil. And why did this happen? Because the world was closed. The world closed in itself, and they saved everything to itself. No exportation was happening. We did not import anything. They were not exporting anything. And what was manufactured here was consumed here because they had the... And if it wasn't for Cristalia laboratories, and I'm saying this for those who do not know, Brazil saved Brazil. And since I'm in this symposium on my immunobiologicals, the last news here too, because they're signaling that I'm out of time, running out of time. He's very discreet. He's tapping his foot. See? Can you see it? So we carried out in our biotechnology, we developed a product called growth hormone, amatropine. So this amatropine is a public partnership with Bio-Manguinhos. And both of us have the same hairdo. I don't know why. So it's a coincidence. And this amatropine and gives to the country and the self-sufficiency in the growth hormone. With this partnership, no international unit was important, and we are serving this market with something to 600 millions of units per year. So I'm going to close saying that Milor Fernandes, and we keep on saying we have to keep on doing. So we have this challenge in IFA, and also at Abifina, I'm talking to BNDES, the development bank. I'm talking to Vice President Geraldo Alckmin, and also with Wallace from MEDIC, so that we can truly have a policy that make the IFA production make true, so that we can have self-sufficiency. And this is constitutional, as I opened my talk, and it was there in chapter 4 and the article, and I will complete my speech here, and I invite you to reflect upon it, and I thank you very much.
Obrigado. Deve ter muitas perguntas, mas vamos deixar para depois, tá bom? Ok? Então, Artur, você... Você está com o lado errado. Aqui. Tá, viu? Melhor me dar o teu mesmo. Bom, boa tarde a todos.
Okay, good afternoon to you all. Thank you very much for the invitation, Dr. Akito, and the coordination of EASY to be able to be part of this table, debating with my colleagues. And just to say that I received many feedbacks upon my arrival here, a little bit different from yours. People said, oh, refrain from what you're going to talk. Don't speak everything that crosses your mind. So I came to the conclusion, because I'm very much critic regarding the scenario, but there are constructive critiques, and I do have some critiques regarding the industrial complex on health, and it starts with the self-sufficiency program. And I could say, Odilon, that in the 80s, we had 98% of the vaccine production was made in Brazil, the manufacturing. 98%, of course, the portfolio was much smaller, but we had a logic of introduction of new vaccines, and we had a clear support from the government saying that only introduction of vaccines in PNI through this partnership with private and public laboratories, and we did growth during that period. And of course, along the time, some of the public laboratories ended closing up, and some of them were able to develop more initiatives. So people could ask that, why did not these laboratories not grow? And we have some questions for that, some answer for that. And some of them is that the state laboratories, with the exception of Butantan, they suffer with the government changes. So you have the shifts in the government to change the team and the leaderships. And another thing is the national politics has peaks and valleys. So when you have this strong policy, you can keep, and the laboratories are more able to fixate their actions. Other thing is the IFA production in Brazil. However, it's behind something called technology. It's no point in talking about IFA. We're talking about technology transfer and innovative products, and this requires funding. You have to have a strategy behind this. And we listen daily that we have to be careful with TCU, and because we can't buy everything in the national market. I'm talking about the industrial healthcare complex. And what are you talking is that what brings to the development of the economy in Brazil? It's important to have a national production because we are generating knowledge, employment, and we're preparing because we can prepare the products here. This industry did not grow due to IFA's presence. On the contrary, and we have a great pharmaceutical and complex here. And we had an evolution during the years, and with the PPPs brought to Brazil a possibility of expansion of the manufacturing laboratories, private and public. And once more, we made mistakes in the idea and in the execution because we thought that the government-owned laboratories could make anything. And then we said that they were incompetent and could not make this. So we have to reflect on this, because why do we accept things that we know they're not going to work? So this is a great problem that we have. So we're going to reflect on this, and who is the coordinator of these ideas are not the laboratories. Is the current government, the government in office, is the one who says that what is important, and they have to carry out a previous assessment, so that because they cannot develop it, because they never done this before. The first round of PPPs in the Gadelha's office administration, we had laboratories of pharmacochemistry that have never treated biological, and they presented proposals for this production. So the chance was zero, and how many laboratories could keep on working? Because they only Manguinhos and some other, because they had this experience and they left the vaccine and they went to the pharmaceutical, but from the chemistry to the biopharmaceutical, it is a big step, and they were not able to reach this, to accomplish this. And they said this policy is not right. So we're repeating the same thing. We have lists of new products without knowing who is going to manufacture this. So we should select everything to Bio-Manguinhos and Butantan Institute. We should put the new products, the biopharma, for both, because they do not have the condition to present other public laboratories to be part of it. And why they should be part of it, it's another failure in the process, because they establish who make this partnership and who has access to the market are the public laboratory, the government-owned laboratories. They have to do this through the government-owned laboratories. And you have private companies who are going to present serious proposals to transfer knowledge, and you have those who just want to access the public market, and they're going to make a partnership knowing that they're not going to produce anything in that laboratory. So this is a failure that has to be corrected. So it's important to understand that it's much better to produce in Brazil from an IFA than depending on the international market. We started last year to producing in Bio-Manguinhos many vaccines in our portfolios, but the transfer of technology to come to IFA was very much relevant. We brought knowledge that we did not have, and we learned greatly with these companies, the private companies, and with time we can learn even more. But the fact that we are producing in Brazil, you're improving the whole productive chain, and you're bringing to Brazil funding, employment, knowledge, things that we did not have in the past. And we are possible with to have people now with specific knowledge in Brazil. We had to train them in the past. So we have graduation programs, post-graduation programs, and we do not even have university training people to work in biological productions. So with this, you can bring the manufacturing and national level, you're bringing knowledge and you're generating knowledge within the country. And we hear many of the times and people criticizing and talking about having a competition process. And no, we should keep this in Brazil. I don't need to generate knowledge abroad. If you have COVID, you can see how much resource was sent abroad and how much stayed in Brazil. I think I frightened them with my speech. I promise that I'm going to stop criticizing everything. I think it was Dr. Akita's foot was something that he threw, so I stopped talking about it. But I think that during the pandemic, it was a very clear example. Many much employments were generated out abroad. So, but we hired many people, and the resources went abroad, and not in there. It's not in Brazil. We are building a new plant now to improve the capacity in Brazil, capability in Brazil, and of course our focus is going to be IFA. But we are working to improve the production of IFA, and as if it's a finished product. But in the pandemic, we saw that it lacked the final capacity because the laboratories did not have the capability to process the IFAs. So we had to seek worldwide those who could manufacture this. So this is important. It's not sufficient. It's not enough. We have to have the national production, but for that we have to generate the knowledge here. It's not the IFA that you're going to bring from abroad. It's how to produce the IFA through innovation in Brazil. This is the issue. How much do you invest in this in Brazil? Nothing. If you take the data from the great pharmaceutical companies, they invest 7 to 10% from their gross revenue. And those who invest in research and development, they are investing a few billions. And if you take Brazil, I'm not talking about the pharmaceuticals, we're talking about 10 million invested. I'm sorry, 1 billion invested and 10 billions executed in 2021. Okay, who invests? Those who invest this volume of resources cannot expect anything from that. So we need more funding, we need more resources, and there is none. So I think that we have many challenges, Dr. Akira, and we need to reach the maturity. However, maturity as well of our leaders, our managers, who are in the end of the process, implementing the policies and generating the policies, not only talk about the policies, but not to be afraid of doing this from a natural entity standpoint, because sometimes I hear people saying that I'm concerned with the control bodies. Are you concerned with the country or the control agencies? So you should only have to answer to the agencies. However, this end up impacting our development and the difficulties that we have to leverage the national manufacturing. I'm going to wrap up here because I do not want to have another bottle thrown on me. Okay, so the last one is better, right, Dr. Atira? So good afternoon. I would like to congratulate the initiatives and the Fiocruz and Bio-Manguinhos for the event. We have this on the calendar in the biotechnology field, and I'm representing the ALFOB president, who is Jorge Mendonça, and he's the president of Manguinhos, and he was not able to be here, unfortunately, but I'm the executive secretariat at ALFOB, and my boss is right here. next to me. And I think that is important to say, and many do not know the ALFOB, which is the Association of Public Laboratories for pharmaceutical use, and we have 40 years old, and we have many associate laboratories, and 3 are the armed forces laboratory, 2 from the Ministry of Health, Manguinhos and Bio-Manguinhos, and the state laboratories, as Artur mentioned, Ezequiel Dias in Minas Gerais, and Butantan in São Paulo, another one in Pernambuco, AFUR in São Paulo, TecPar in Paraná, and many other state laboratories linked to universities like Lutz in Paraíba, another one in Rio Grande do Norte state. So we have a diversity, legal and administration diversity of laboratories. You have federal, state, and municipal laboratories, many connected to the defense ministry and armed forces. So you have several types of entities. And when we talk about this subject, we're talking about politics of a right of establishing an order, national order to foster the national industry in self-sufficiency and its challenges, and for its maturity in the production of pharmaceutical inputs, and also for pharmaceutical products.
Sejam de origem biológica e sintética e também produtos para a saúde. Então nós temos associado na ALFOB que trabalha com órtese e prótese.
So we're working with prostheses and other public and health products. That's the way that wide gamut of products. Our cure has talked about our origins. If we are to think it's 100 years old, a Butantan, Fiocruz, Ezequiel Dias, Brazil. These are laboratories that have been in operation for 100 years, and it's the Brazilian vanguard in the operation of serums and vaccines ever since last century. So the presence of the public laboratories and the public health system in Brazil is centuries old. And our responsibility that we have as a country is centuries old as well. So we have this network that, in addition to offering that, it also works on research and development. Artur mentioned, right, the question of the teaching, graduate studies. Some of our laboratories have that possibility as well. That's very important. We have continuing education extension services to our population. The Museum of Life at Fiocruz, Butantan has a museum. FUNAP is science and movement that does work with the community. But what we need in Brazil and what we have seen over a century in operation is that the participation of public laboratories has been effective, and they're the ones who actually held a sway. But we're one of the few countries in the world that we have a network like that in our hands with those features, those characteristics to produce vaccines, to produce serum and synthetic products and reagents and research and development. Overall, we're over 8,500 professionals, and we have 600 people with a master's and 500 people with a PhD in the public laboratory network. Very few people know that, but effectively, we have effective participation in Brazilian society. So I always look at the glass half full, because the half empty glass, working as a network, it needs to, and then Odilon, if you will allow me, we need a state policy to back us up. When we talk about a state policy, we need a framework, a legal framework with federal rules and regulations that characterize this network. Because so far, our network is not marked by, it is not guided by any federal legislation. These are government initiatives through ministerial decrees or administrative decrees that cater to the needs of this public laboratory system. The strength of Bio-Manguinhos and Butantan has to do with a state policy. They are what they are today, and they have grown and prevailed, and they have a line of investments because we have a national immunization program created back in the 70s that has been in operation for over 50 years, and it comes from the federal government, and it has trespassed public health, and Odilon, it has been reinforced by the public health system, SUS. If it's a state policy, it is assured of financing and a budget, and as a state policy backing it up. So the question of having this network of ours and the question of tech trends and incorporating technology in this network of laboratories, you need what? You need a legal framework that will ensure that we will strengthen our sovereignty, taking on a certain degree of self-sufficiency that we want to have, and the platforms, technological platforms that we'll be working on, so that what Arthur said won't take place at the origin of this policy, because the complex industrial policy comes from 2008 and has grown through administrative decrees, ministry decrees. So there is a legal frailty to it. There's a legal weakness because ministerial decrees, if I'm a new government, I will turn it down immediately and there will be a new decree, or I'll just suppress it. I'll call it off. Then the policy is no longer in operation. So we are at the mercy of the government's at hand. So there's no sustainability in the Brazilian state. This current government with neo-industry and new industrial policy, it doesn't matter. What matters to us is that we'll be bringing assurances to this public network of laboratories so that they'll be working through partnerships with the private sector in sustainable ways, because public laboratories won't take up the role of the private sector. It's quite the opposite. They must establish niches within pre-established platforms, and the rules and regulations that the Brazilian federal government will outline for society. What we're waiting for within that industrial policy, complex policy, we're waiting for decrees published last year, and with the decrees, two of them are under public consultation. The productive development decree, which is the new decree to regulate PDPs, as Arthur said, and it means that what's a PDP? It's a public laboratory together with a private partner, be it national or foreign or multinational, to develop strategic products that will be incorporated into the public health system. The list of the public health system that is part of the list of essential medications as established by the federal government, whether biofarms and vaccines or synthetic products. This network of public laboratories, 100% of the anti-poison serums are produced by these laboratories. Over 50% of the AIDS retroviral products are produced by these laboratories. Over 80% of the UPNE vaccines are produced by this network. Most of the reagents are produced by this network of laboratories. So the role of these laboratories, the role they perform in Brazilian society is quite significant. What we must do, the challenge of the government is to turn that into a state policy that's ongoing and permanent. And that's, we must ensure, and that's where it's under discussion within the Association of Laboratories, we must have a legal framework, federal legal framework, that will provide guidelines towards the normatization of these laboratories in order to avoid interferences from other agencies, like accounts courts and when the accounts departments of the government, for example, they slap Arthur with lawsuits, for example. Why? Because there is a political weakness within ministerial decrees that rule over the policy. So the challenge that we have on the table, and just to wrap up my remarks, the challenge we have on the table for public laboratories in Brazil is we must ensure that the glass half full. It's what we've been doing, and we've been doing a great job of it. What Bio-Manguinhos and Butantan stand for in Brazilian society at the vanguard There's something exceptional. It imbues us with pride and infuses us with pride. And the laboratory of the state of Pernambuco, which has internalized the synthetic pills for schizophrenia, it's a source of pride for all of us in Brazil. We're very proud of it. We still have a public health system based on synthetic products that finds itself, I would say, obsolete. It's an obsolescence and it's unproductive because most of that network has to deal with certification issues. The challenge facing these public laboratories, Artur said once, he said in a talk of his, we're looked at as a multinational corporation by Anvisa, but when we sell our products, we must sell them at prices of African countries to the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health sees us as a multinational corporation, but we must sell our products at very cheap prices, African prices. So this is a world problem within regulatory agencies, Anvisa, FDA in the US, European agency, Canadian agency, Australian agency, Japanese agency, it doesn't matter. The public laboratories must cater to all of these issues and must juggle all these requirements. And the cutting edge that we're walking on, the tightrope we're walking on, is that we cater to national public health issues, which is the goal that we have in front of us, but also we must cater also to the regulations set by Anvisa. All of these things under a bidding, a procurement law that doesn't understand the strategic role that these laboratories play in research and development in Brazil. So one of the issues that we're faced with, one of our challenges, so that within the industrial health complex policy is to establish an official network of Brazilian laboratories. It requires a federal legislative framework that contemplates the features of this network. The network doesn't want privileges, but it needs to work under a certain set of guidelines for the benefit of the Brazilian population. Thank you. Our time is over, but perhaps 2 or 3 questions, if we could ask them in a pithy way. Could we entertain 2 or 3 questions? Good afternoon, everyone. Very quick. João Paulo, Oswald Cruz Institution and CNPq researcher. Congratulations to Odilon, Esper, Artur, and Luiz. In reality, I think that Odilon hit the nail on the head. The question today in Brazil, we have human resources that are qualified, extremely competent. We have a high number of young researchers with high competency, but we need a state policy so that we may, without a fine chemical industry, cutting edge industry, we won't be able to make any breakthroughs. I was starting to zoom over lunch about this topic. See, our public here, our audience here, unfortunately, I am included in this because we're wrong. Because we should have in the audience the former presidents of the Republic, the future candidates for presidency of the Republic, the former governors and future governors, state governors. These are the people that make the necessary decisions. So Akira, you started talking about our patron, Oswald Cruz. My proposal is that this talk will be taken to the current president of the Republic and the future candidates for president of the Republic, that they should be coming up with a research and development, innovation and production state policy, a state policy geared to all these important issues. One more question and then that's it. We'll call it a day for the time being, at least. So, all right, no more questions. Thank you. I do thank you very much. I would like to thank all the participants on the lawn, Esper and Artur, Luiz, for this great panel. I think you left out more questions and answers, but it's important to have this exchange of ideas. The right questions, that's food for thought for later debates. Thank you so much.